For somebody that's early stage, how should they think about finding the right investors, especially somebody that doesn't have the network? How would you suggest they go start even building those relationships?
There is a hack. Always take an intro from a founder in our portfolio 100% of the time, no questions asked. If you're an early stage founder, you don't have a network, but you wanted to meet NEA, go get one of NEA's portfolio companies or a few of them as design partners or customers or advocates or whatever. If they're using the product, that's a really good way to get an investor's attention. Most of the time, a lot of the companies I reach out to is because I hear my startups talking about them, about how we're using this new whatever HR tool, or we're using this new go-to-market tool, and it's been game changing. I'm like, what's the name of the company? Let me see. Sometimes I have to sign off on big procurement purchases, and I'm like, when we see the budget, right? I'm like, oh, what's this software? Why are we spending so much on that? They're like, oh, it's the best thing ever. I'm like, oh, I need to go find those founders. So sell into the portfolio, I think, is like the quickest hack if you're a B2B company. And then ask those founders, if you've served them well, as the founders of that portfolio company, can you get an intro to someone at different investment firms that have invested in your company? If you're a consumer, that's a bit harder. So I would just look at investors that have invested in parallel things. A big waste of time. I get a lot of, for instance, I invested in Majuri. It's a jewelry D2C company. I got a ton of founders in jewelry being like, oh, you invested in Majuri, you should look at us. I'm like, we're not competitive. I'm like, no, but here's the thing. Like, I already invested in that like category. I have to diversify my portfolio. I'm not going to invest in like two jewelry companies. I invested in a postpartum care and everyone's like, oh, well, this is like postpartum, but in a different area. I'm like, well, I already picked, like it's too specific.
Yep.
So yes, if I do marketplaces, I will look at another marketplace company, but ideally in a totally different industry than some of my other investments. So you want to find an investor that invests in the category, but hasn't invested in your industry.
I see. Yeah.
I get a lot of those. I'm like, that's a total waste of time.
Wonderful. And probably building relationships over time with investors, not when you need to raise, but before that.
Yeah, that's hard, right? Because you only have bandwidth for some of those, so you need to at least know you're going to convert some. And same
Yeah.
thing for the investor. They only have bandwidth for a dozen of those a year to like maintain a relationship. So they likely won't do that unless it's something that they're really interested in or an industry they've spent a lot of time investigating and they just really want to know how companies are doing. So again, you still have to find the right match even to propose that.
Yeah. I think that's spot on. It's something that you hear that a lot, right? Build a relationship before you need to invest, but it's hard to do so. I love the approach of selling to the portfolio companies of the investor that you ideally want to meet.
That's the fastest, quickest way to get to it. And you don't have to take the investor out for coffee 12 times in a year, right? You just be like, I sold to Branch. They love it. We've tripled the size of the account in less than a year. Like, Mike, don't you love our tool? Can you introduce it to Vanessa? And you'd be like, hey, we love this thing. But like 100% I'm going to take that meeting. And it's very likely I'll invest too.
Yeah. Yeah.